Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the Omniviewer, and welcome to In Defense Of, a series in which I'll be taking a look at all those things that everybody loves to hate, and trying to prove that maybe they're not as bad as everybody thinks. Now, that's a pretty wide area to cover, so where could I possibly begin? Perhaps you've heard of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic? Ah, yes, My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. A series originally intended to sell toys to little girls that has since become a worldwide phenomenon with adult men and adult women, thus leading to the age of the bronies. Well, I have no shame in admitting that I'm a brony myself, as if the derpy figurine behind me wasn't enough of a clue. But rather than talk about the whole series, I'd rather talk about one episode in particular. Now, as with any TV show, My Little Pony has good episodes, average episodes, and bad episodes. But each season so far has had at least one episode in particular that everybody agrees is the worst of the worst. And for season 1, that episode appears to be Over a Barrel, an episode that drew a lot of controversy by drawing from the historical conflict between...
Wait just a cotton-pickin' minute here.
What?
Don't you know, this is pony analysis you're doing, and federal law clearly states that pony analysis can only be done by non-human original characters represented by a series of static images. That means this review falls to me.
I don't have a choice, do I?
No.
Okay then. Ladies and gentlemen, the remainder of this review shall be handled by my DeviantArt avatar, Snazzy Chapeau. Say hello, Snazzy.
Hello, Snazzy. Now, where were we?
Plot summary.
Well, Applejack has a nice, firm... Oh, you mean the story. Right. Here we go. The episode sees the main six heading west, or south according to the official map, to the frontier town of Appaloosa, where they are to deliver an apple tree named Bloomberg to the town's new orchard. Trouble arises, however, when the native buffalo tribe steals both the tree and Spike. Rainbow Dash pursues the buffalo and learns that they are in conflict with the settler ponies because the orchard is planted on their traditional stampeding ground. The conflict becomes escalated as Rainbow and Applejack draw lines in the sand over the issue, and an impromptu song from Pinkie Pie only makes matters worse. With tensions running high and no clear solution in sight, the main six must find a way to prevent all-out war from tearing the equestrian frontier apart. So you've probably figured out by now that this episode is based on history, specifically the conflict between American settlers and American natives. The episode has garnered a lot of hatred from even the staunchest of bronies. They say it is racist in how it depicts natives and settlers as different species, and that it oversimplifies a complex and dark part of American history. Having seen the episode, I respectfully disagree. In fact, I think the episode is unfairly reviled, which is what I'm here to talk about. First, let me address the claims of racism. As mentioned, the ponies here represent the settlers, most of whom were white, and the buffalo represent the natives, who were not white. Some have interpreted this as being a form of racism, claiming that the inference, albeit unintentional, is that the two groups are somehow inherently different, which flies in the face of the episode's secondary message about equality. There is a history, after all, of white people thinking of those with different skin tones as subhuman. However, the people who say this are actually missing something very clever that the episode is doing. In the real world, buffalo are native to the American continent. Do you know what species is not native to America? Ponies. They were brought to America by the settlers. Yes, there were native horses in prehistory that went extinct, but modern equines were brought to the New World from Europe. When you get right down to it, the idea of equines invading the land of the buffalo is almost exactly the way it happened in real life. Racism has nothing to do with it. Whether or not the writers had this in mind when they wrote the episode, I don't know, but it was still pretty neat to see. The bigger issue, however, is the one regarding oversimplification. The most common criticism leveled against Over a Barrel is that it takes a complex, violent, relatively dark part of American history and turns it into something trivial and sugar-coated, especially that super happy ending. As most people would say, it's more complicated than that. In my experience, this expression is code for, this is an issue I don't want to discuss, but I'm going to make it sound like I could while still providing an out for myself by implying that you are the one incapable of discussing it. I think the issue should be discussed, but first, we need to alter the way we're looking at things. Speaking as somebody who has watched a lot of cartoons in his life, I can tell you with utmost certainty that the oversimplification of reality with animal protagonists to prove a point is a tradition going back to the very dawn of animation. Heck, it even predates that, as Aesop was using animals to illustrate sociopolitical ideas before the birth of Christ. The purpose of doing this is to present a new perspective on the topic being discussed. To help illustrate my point, consider the following example, an obscure Looney Tunes short known as The Fighting 69 and a Half. The cartoon opens with a lavish picnic that's been laid out and strangely left unattended. Two groups of ants, one red, one black, see the picnic and wish to claim the food, but neither side is willing to share with the other. When quarreling turns to provocation, the two sides mobilize and start an all-out war, complete with artillery and air support. Eventually, the humans return and pack their now ruined picnic, leaving behind a single piece of cake that the ants continue fighting over until the leaders decide that the fighting just isn't getting any results. They call a peace conference and agree to divide the cake evenly between them. However, when the red ants draw the lines in such a way that gives them slightly more than the black ants, conflict erupts yet again. Now, as some of you may have gathered from the visuals, some of which are in shockingly bad taste, this cartoon is inspired by World War I, right down to the way it ends, with a sudden decision to stop and the redrawing of borders that results in another fight. Some people might argue that the cartoon oversimplifies the war, but take another look. Not at the cartoon, but at history. In 1914, all of Europe was itching to go to war, and they jumped at the first chance that presented itself. Poor decisions were made all around, nothing of significance was really gained by either side, and the way it ended was so poorly handled that it basically made World War II a question of when rather than if. It was a war that did not need to happen, plain and simple, and ultimately it did more harm than good. Most importantly, though, looking back, the whole thing just seems so pointless, so cheap, so petty. Why, it almost seems as petty as, well, as ants fighting over a picnic. In that sense, the cartoon is very accurate in its portrayal. Now look at the history that Over a Barrel draws from. On the one side, you have the people that need a place to live, as there are no options left in the so-called civilized world, and they're settling in the only places available. On the other hand, you have the people who have already been living in those places for generations and don't appreciate being forced out so a bunch of strangers can claim it for themselves. Both sides could probably have worked out a compromise, but the people who believed that the West wasn't big enough for the two of them overshadowed the people that would have sought a peaceful solution. That certainly sounds like how it happened to me, and that's how it played out in Over a Barrel. As for the super happy ending, consider that a depiction of what should have happened rather than what did happen. Now, I'm not about to pretend that there was no more to that period of time than what I described. There was much more to the issue, far more than we have time to discuss here. However, this does not change the fact that Over a Barrel is not the horrible summarization of bloodshed that everybody says it is. Rather than inspire cries of racism and ignorance, it should be inspiring discussion on what caused the conflict and how to prevent history from repeating itself. If all we do is say that real history was more complicated than that and go no further, we're missing the point entirely. Even if it was complicated, think about how simple the solution was. And for the love of God, stop trying to make it more complicated by misinterpreting things and drawing attention to stuff that doesn't matter. Nothing will change if we focus on the fact that the ponies are fighting by throwing pies at each other.
But you have to admit, the whole fighting with pies thing was pretty stupid, wasn't it?
I said no real people allowed! Get out or I'll kick your teeth in! Either way, I think Over a Barrel is a good episode, and it deserves more love than it receives. Until such time as we meet again, this is Snazzy Chapeau signing off.
That's my line. Wait, since this is pony analysis, shouldn't you be a unicorn or something?
Hey, Dr. Wolf gets away with it, why can't I?
Good point, I suppose.